WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I am positively refreshed and back and ready for, well, I wasn't ready for the cicadas all around my building and all that. It is sort of a special summer here and I would speak as someone who finally went on a vacation with my wife and got like on a raft without a mask and with shots up and did something that felt like normal for like 5 days. That it is good to be alive in the summer of 2021 and doing the recon with Don Moeller. Don, before we get going, I want to give love to Fadley's and I want to give love to Costas and our crab cake tour. We're going to do a lot of that. We did our state fair thing. I want to give them a shout out too. But we got a new sponsor, Matt over at Woodrow's. Makes the best barbecue I've ever had. I've told you about this privately. I've even told Matt Gallagher about it. But everybody should go to Woodrow's. I'm wearing the shirt. My wife said it blended in too much. I said it's kind of Oriole orange, and they had a good weekend. Don would be happy with me that I'm pimping a little orange today. So how are you? I've been off the grid for a week, and I feel completely ignorant to all the world's problems. And I want to recon with you, Don.
Well, it never fails, but you mentioned our good buddy Matt Gallagher, and if Gallagher is going to sign off on Woodrow's, the lines will
I haven't taken him yet. I haven't taken him yet.
You've got to take him because he's our resident foodie. Whenever I'm looking to take folks somewhere downtown to a new place, my first text is to Matt Gallagher.
Dude, he hit me on a Peruvian place I'd never heard of the other night that I'm going to have to check out. So I'm going to get Gallagher on the show this week. I'm going to make sure he comes on. Wow. You and I can hang out and do that. How was your week? I mean, you were down you're doing the Kent Island thing, and I'm trying to get my Ocean City plans together and get the beginning of the tour together. And I think I want to kick the tour off on Kent Island. I think on August the 1st, because that's like sort of going. That's when you get that anticipation when you get across the bridge, you know what I mean? And there's that open road there ahead of you. That's when you get excited about Maryland, I think.
Well, there certainly are no shortage of outstanding restaurants and pubs and bars in Kent Island. It's amazing. And you mentioned cicadas. Here's a little known cicada fact. There is not one cicada on Kent Island. So we leave Catonsville, and I love the cicadas. It's just something very natural and environmental about it. They are deafening.
Did you run from the cicadas?
No, I didn't run
go to
from
Kent
them.
Island for some peace and quiet?
Just happened to be coming to Kent Island for a couple of days. But you get down here, and Linda, who knows all things gardening and insects and trees and bushes, says no, they aren't on Kent Island or the Eastern Shore because they can't thrive in the sandy soil. So once again, we learned something about cicadas, that once you cross the bridge, there are no cicadas.
Donna, I would say this. I've done about 10 pieces since I've been back, and cicadas have been a part of every single piece I've done. And I think it's because they're going to be gone in a couple of weeks. Those of us old enough to remember them a couple of times. But I had forgotten about them. I had been away. We had tree frogs. And we came home and our cat is at the window and they are literally all over our building. We lived in this building 17 years ago. This is a different kind of infestation that we're all talking about it. I think they're safe to eat. I think we have found that out, that if you do eat them, you will not die. Your dog might.
I kidded County Executive Oshevsky. I reached out to him when I saw they did a big press thing where he ate a couple of fried cicadas. And I said, there's a lot that I miss about the job, but pulling up to the table and eating a few fried cicadas probably is not one. But he said they weren't half bad. So you're right. You can pop them in. You can eat them. I heard people say.
Well, I mean, come on. Your wife and you run around Paris. She eats snails, doesn't she? Does she not?
She doesn't. I would. Yes, she doesn't, but I would.
You're an escargot guy.
Yeah, Nestor, there's hardly, as she would tell you, it would be hard to come up with something that I don't like.
You eat liver and onions?
Well, that's
gross.
God bless you, Nestor. Somehow you must have known that when we go to record this edition of the Recon, my favorite person ever on the face of the earth, my mom, June Scruggs Moeller, the one all the kids called Q because of her white hair. They said she looked like a Q-tip. She would have been 96 years old today. And Jeffrey and Jennifer and Linda remind me, no, she's not 96. When you go to heaven, you get to be whatever age you want to be. So we're going with that. But you mentioned the liver and onions is an interesting call.
My mother
about
ate
the
that
food.
crap.
Oh my God. My mother loved her some liver and onions, smothered in onions. And I can
My
remember as
mother
a
would
kid.
go to the dime store and order it, like
Yeah,
literally
wherever.
at the
Diners.
Murphy's. Yeah, at the mall, like
Yeah.
literally when I was a little boy at the counter, like, and they would fry it up and they'd plop it down and I'd sit there and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're going to eat.
Oh,
And I was only 6 then.
Nestor, I thought it smelled awful, everything about it. Now, I will say that as I've gotten older,
Oh,
um, I can now eat it. It wouldn't be something that I would rush out to get. Um, I also, my list is very small of
if there's
things that I would
anything
like.
else on the menu, you're going to get that. You're not
Yes.
right. Okay,
And,
fair
and
enough.
and the other thing that I did not like at all as a young boy were beets. And
I
I
hate
still
beets.
don't
Oh,
like.
my wife bought a couple the other day over Wise. No. They
Yeah, now
taste like dirt.
I can do roasted beet salad and that kind of thing, but the beets that we
I
used
don't
to
eat
have
beets.
and probably your mom and dad served, I thought, you know what? It was one of those deals, right? Because when I was growing up, it was one of those things. You sit at the table until your plate is clean, and I can remember, well, we're going to be sitting here a really long time because I'm not
You
doing
know what
beets.
food? I talk so much about food I love, and there's so many foods I love. And this time of year, just getting heirloom tomatoes now, and the corn's coming. We picked up some peaches. My son
Oh,
passed me some peaches. So, but
peaches,
things I
corn,
don't like.
tomatoes, it gets you through, right?
Yeah, there's not a lot I don't eat. I mean, some things upset my stomach.
Right.
Onions don't always agree with me. Various things that, that I like that don't like me back. Like I love fried onions and stuff, but I can't pile them on a cheesesteak the way I would or a steak or anything else. Speaking of liver and onions, I love onions. Um, but I'm thinking about things I don't like. Man, there's not much. I mean, I don't like beets. I don't like sort of weirdly meats. I've never been a venison fan. It's not that I haven't tried it.
Yeah, I can eat it.
I'm not a duck fan, or like a duck fat fry is fine. But I've never had a Peking duck that I thought was like, oh, that's better than a rotisserie chicken. I prefer chicken to turkey, but I like turkey. I have all of these preferences, but not a whole lot of restrictions in my diet. I mean, I'm not going to be eating pig's feet or tripe if I can help it. You know what I mean? Or cow eyeballs or whatever. And
Right.
so,
Yeah,
so I mean, there's parts of that I don't need that. I don't need rabbit in my diet, but like I guess I wouldn't turn down a rabbit stew if I was in Louisiana or something and doing what the people do. But the cicada thing, we were talking this week about using them as fishing lure, right? Putting them on a fish
that
hook.
makes sense.
And that's like for fishermen right now, this month, the only month you're going to have to fish with these,
Well,
these creatures,
I'll
right?
tell my son-in-law to grab some cicadas from home and bring them on down. But you know, Nestor, it has happened again. I guess we've been doing the recon for a couple of months now, and we joke that it makes no difference what list we come up with. Something happens as we're getting ready to go on the air. And sure enough, we're getting ready. We've got the list. We're ready to talk about everything that's going on in the world, John Rahm and the Orioles and everything else. And a California judge, district court judge named Roger Benitez, rules and strikes down California's assault weapons ban that's been in place since 1989. And in the first sentence of his opinion, not buried somewhere down pages in the first sentence, compares AR 15s to a Boy Scout Swiss Army knife. Now, again, you've been away, you've been on vacation, you've tried to avoid all of the nuttiness, but a federal court district judge compared AR 15s to a Boy Scout Swiss Army knife. Now, I would ask
I know
all
how
of you.
much respect you have for like judges, like Jim
Oh,
Smith and your relationship, and what honorable
Judge Dick
people.
Bennett, I can go down the
Judge
list.
Bell is a dear friend of mine.
Judge
Has been
Pat
a
Stringer,
neighbor of
we
mine
can
forever.
go on and on and
Yeah,
on.
of course. And you'd like to think that no one in that position would utter such obvious nonsense.
Well, Nestor, here's evidently what it's about. It makes it even worse. Evidently, you do some research on Judge Benitez, and evidently he is a die-in-the-wool Second Amendment guy, no limitations, has been that way for a long, long time, and evidently has been looking for this ruling, waiting for the new Supreme Court, knowing that it will get appealed, and that his goal is to actually have the new former celebrity president's court uh, uphold the ruling, in effect outlawing every state's assault weapons ban. So all of a sudden in Maryland, people will be able to walk around with assault weapons as well. Now, it will be interesting to watch because I don't know if people have been paying attention. This court, over the past 6 to 8 weeks, has probably issued, I want to say, at least 5 or 6 opinions on a variety of issues that have been unanimous. So there is an attempt. There are times when, despite the divided nature of the country, this court appears to be able to cut through that. Now, whether they'll be able to do that on some of the real issues, they're about ready to rule on Obamacare. Once again, they obviously will have issues related to right to choose coming up and Second Amendment. Whether they're able to strike a bipartisan approach to that, we shall see. But
Elections
Nestor,
are important,
I
aren't
can't.
they? When you start to talk about
Oh my!
these
Well,
real
I'm going to.
core
We're
issues
going to
about
talk.
guns and women's rights and human rights and people rights, and um, it just makes these elections and what is happening in red states right now in regard to voter suppression more obvious in regard to where our democracy could be headed. Hence, people ask why I turn to you and other people and your whole Rolodex over the last 3 years to open up a different kind of conversation here. I'm talking about race. I'm talking about guns. I'm talking about freedom. I'm talking about crime, things that, are all funnel into this, but all of this really does come down to voting. And it's something unique in our democracy that I never had you for social studies, but we're working on it right now. That I don't think the majority of us in the country even understand the bigger picture of how important it is. And I know that from my own experience in talking to people to say, well, I don't vote because of this, or I only vote here or there because of that. And I think to myself, it's the only thing that sort of opens the doors for us to not be Russia or not
Oh,
be Iraq or not be Saudi Arabia, where 5 really rich people get together and put some guns together and say, we're going to run the place and we're going to call ourselves the mafia.
well, I hope that all of our listeners, all of our friends, pay attention to what you just said, because I'm going to make one more comment about the judge and the assault weapon ban, and then I'm going to jump on your point about voting, because I thought about that a lot this morning, and I'll get to that in a minute. But it's amazing. People know we send notes back and forth, but we really don't green room the Recon. And what you just said
I don't
is
allow it. He had
you
3-hour
don't. I
meeting
would.
about a 30-minute segment,
All right,
but I
he's
wouldn't allow
outing me.
that.
He's outing me.
That's true.
I would green room it, but he doesn't allow it. But I can't. When a judge says that an AR-15 is the same as a Swiss Army knife,
He's not a judge any longer.
well, I am.
Not shouldn't be in this society.
All right. Here's a quiz for you, and I think you will get the answer. Where am I immediately transported back 9 years when a judge says something like that? Where am I transported back in a time machine 9 years ago? This August.
Go ahead.
August 27th, 2012. I am at Woodlawn High School with Dr. Dallas Dance and County Executive Kevin Kamenetz on the first day of school. we are visiting schools in all parts of the county. And all of a sudden, all of our phones, folks have heard me tell the story, all of our phones blow up. I see the county executive grab his phone. I see his security detail grabbing their phones. I see the superintendent grabbing his phone. I'm grabbing my phone. Simply says, school shooting, Perry Hall High School cafeteria. We leave Woodlawn. We tell everybody we've got to go. We rush to Perry Hall. Young man is shot in the cafeteria by a 15-year-old who walks into the cafeteria with a traditional rifle, not multiple magazines, not an AR-15, not an AK-47, fires a couple shots, injures some students, and a heroic Perry Hall guidance counselor, heroic, tackles the young man. They get him under control. He's taken away, and the damage.
I had a guidance counselor once in Baltimore County. Remember?
Yeah, I don't know if he'd have been.
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean,
Bo,
I think we often wonder. Don, I never went to school one day in my life. And I mean, in Holabird, everybody had muscles. People were punching each other. I mean, I saw kids bloodied in the hallways. Holabird was a shit show. You know, it's the worst 3 years of my. I hated junior high, but I never feared somebody was coming in with a gun, and I certainly didn't feel that way at Dundalk High, where I had a really good experience. You know, I had an integrated, you know, for all the crap, and we talked about this in the '80s. My Dundalk High experiences were nothing like that. My Dundalk High experiences were kind of awesome, quite frankly. And I had a pregnant girlfriend in high school. You know what I mean? Like, but I never thought anything like that at Dundalk. And I never thought that at Holabird either. Holabird was different. Holabird was like a lot of troubled kids.
Middle school's a tough time. But no, you're right. I mean, I loved my Dundalk years, loved my Owls. And when a judge wants to equate it, and I've said this before as well, and I'll never forget, we were on a county executive cabinets was having a debate on WYPR.
Wait, my son went to Perry Hall High.
Right. And the county executive's having this debate, and someone suggests to him, well, Mr. County Executive, you're focusing on the weapon. The weapon doesn't matter. It's the behavior. And Kevin goes, well, excuse me for a minute. Had this young man that walked into the Perry Hall High School cafeteria had an AK-47 or an AR-15 or a rifle that mimicked an AK-47 or mimicked an AR-15 that had multiple rounds, magazines that can fire 10, 20, 30, 40 bullets at a time, we'd have had dozens, if not hundreds, of Perry Hall students dead before that heroic
We know what that is. That's Parkland.
Exactly. So, yeah, well, I want to make, and that's, again, folks, we don't compare notes ahead of time. But remember, this judge says it's a Swiss Army knife. So before we leave this topic, let me walk through mass shooting incidents in the United States that have been committed with AR-15, AK-47 type rifles. The Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, the Las Vegas Music Festival, Parkland High School, Sandy Hook Elementary School. Remember, Nestor, it's
Tell
just
the victims and their families
it's just a Swiss Army knife. So this judge should be ashamed. But let me bring it back. Let me bring it back to some hopefulness, because you nailed it. And all of our screaming, and I appreciate that you didn't scream, because all of the screaming, all of the jumping up and down in the world isn't going to make a difference. What is going to make a difference is people voting. And it's never been clearer than in the past month or so in trying to follow the bouncing ball and what it is that Joe Manchin believes. And again, I'm not going to vilify Joe Manchin. I don't agree with anything that he apparently stands for. I understand the dilemma that Democrats have. He's the only Democrat that could be elected in West Virginia. So if Joe Manchin gets fed up with Democrats, and changes parties. Well, at least in our lifetime, I don't think even in yours, certainly not in mine, we won't be electing any more Democrats in West Virginia. And I'm not going to talk about Kristen Sinema at length. She's like, I call her the Phoebe Buffet of the United States Senate. We'll get to her later. But the issue is in 2022 and 2024, the only way around this toward substantive change is for people who agree with you and me and millions of others. And again, I remind folks, particularly on the gun issue, Nestor and I went over this.
The gun issue is an 80% issue.
Well, Nestor, we pointed out, only 22% of the American public own a gun. Yet we have 390 million guns in America for 330 million people. We have 120 guns for every 100 people. We have 4% of the world's population and almost 50% of the guns. Now, if you're out there and you think that makes no sense, then you need to vote, because Joe Manchin is not going to change his mind. We've got to stop, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone. I've got to stop waiting for Joe Manchin to get religion. He's not. He knows what gets him elected. So therefore, the Biden agenda, for better or worse, is pretty much grinding to a halt. You know, he had the immediate success with the American job, with the Recovery Act.
Well, most Republicans would tell you that that's why they send people there, is to stop progress.
Right.
You know.
So the answer will be
obstructionism will be the hallmark of the midlife of me on the planet here, that on both sides, you know, that if America is truly first amongst Americans, having some ground where we at least say, well, I don't like that, but like it has to happen. We're not going to allow that to happen, and we're not going to allow that to happen, and we're not going to allow that to happen. And then we just become obstructionists. That's literally what the whole goal of sending people to Washington. And then you say, well, why aren't things getting done? Well, no one's allowing anything to get done.
No, it's going to grind to a halt. I can't imagine that they'll reach any kind of compromise on infrastructure. So Democrats will have to go it through reconciliation again. Manchin and Sinema will have to decide whether or not they're okay with reconciliation. I mean, Joe Manchin wrote an op-ed recently where he says he's not going to vote for H.R. 1. You and I have had our good friend, Congressman John Sarbanes, on many times. H.R. 1 is simply a bill about good government. It's now S1. It can't go anywhere without Joe Manchin. So the really big and bold things that the American public agrees with are going to now grind to a halt. But on a much more positive note, I know you and Luke have been talking about it. You've been away.
Are you going to go to a positive note on the Orioles?
I am.
The worst
I am,
league.
because I think they're a fascinating team to watch right now. And I'm going to throw out, here's my question to you. Listen, when I say positive, they're still not going to win. I can't imagine they win 71 or 72 games. But here's the question, Nestor. If you're the general manager, and I think this is what Mike Elias and Sid Medal and these guys, the decision they're going to have to make soon. There's a couple big ifs here, okay? But give me the ifs and then give me the answer. If Cedric Mullins, and my grandson Jake texts me 10 times a day about Cedric Mullins. He loves him some Cedric Mullins. If Cedric Mullins is not a mirage, and I've got to tell you, back in April, I thought, we've seen people have a good couple weeks before. In May, league adjusted a little bit. He came back to earth. I thought, okay, if he can hit 260, 270 the way he feels like Paul Blair, I can live with that. Well, now he's raking again. If he's not a mirage, and if he's a legitimate 300 hitter for the next 5 or 6 years, we know what his defense is. It's Gold Glove defense. And if Ryan Minor has figured it out, early in the sophomore slump, he's hitting like what is it, 325
You mean
over the
Mountcastle.
past. Matt Castle, what did I say? Meyer. Yeah, Ryan Matt Castle. If he's hitting 325 over the past dozen games or so, with an OPS up around 900, 950. If the back end of the bullpen, if Tanner Scott can figure out where the strike zone is, and if Hunter Harvey can stop being the tin man, so that those guys can stabilize the back end of your bullpen, then with what you have in Bowie, in Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall and Adley Rushman, and a little lower down with Gunnar Henderson and Jordan Westerberg and others, I think the question becomes, Nestor, and I want you to weigh in, are they closer than the brain trust thought they might be? And then does that suddenly begin to change their behavior?
Well, I don't know where Mullins is. Mullins' value will be judged in the marketplace, right? Like, so.
And I didn't even mention Mancini. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, same thing with Mancini. I mean, Means right now he's considered brittle, and this is the third year there's been an issue with him, even though he's been incredibly successful. So for all of these guys, if you're not winning with them now and you're not winning in 22, and as I said, they're not trying to win right now. They've just lost 14 games in a row. They're
well, that's my question. Wait a minute.
They're no longer a contender to be a growth year. This is going to be a bad year for them from a wins and losses perspective.
But
it's
don't
now an
jump
exhibition
over.
season.
But don't jump over what you just said. That's the point I want. I really do want your take on it. I had thought that the earliest year possible where we could perhaps be excited again would be 23. I'm not so sure now that with a couple of key pieces that couldn't be accelerated to 22. And here's why I say that. If you have Mullins, if you have Mountcastle,
I think they will have Mullins because I don't think he's a guy another team is going to give them the kind of value you're looking
for. That's my
for.
question then.
I don't think he's that prospect. I don't. Mancini's not that guy, but I think Mancini could be a guy that could bring a nice piece because he's older and let him go. I mean, he's not going to be here.
Yeah.
Means is more interesting because I think the Means of 4 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and you look at that in the body of work and say, if that continues, but that's part of it. It has to continue in order to give him value in the same way with Mullins. In the same way that you're dealing Mullins in May is different than dealing him in June. So this is it's a stock market and it's a need-based thing for other teams.
But
and how desperate those teams are going to be for that specific need.
Now, but see, I'm not talking about selling off parts. I don't think I'm being clear. I want to go back to my question because this is the one that's suddenly to me.
Well, then ask your question. What's your question?
I'm trying. Has the success of some of these players, and we've mentioned the core of them, the 3 or 4 core, it appears now, again, it can always go south, but it does appear that as opposed to Matt Wieters, who ended up being okay, Matt wasn't great. He was a decent Oriole. He made a couple of 4 All-Star games, I think. I mean, he was a decent player, but he was never a great player. It does appear that Adley Rushman perhaps could be a Tatis or a Soto and be somebody that's a real superstar. So
he's a 1-1 for crying out loud.
Well, I understand, and he should be.
I mean, he's a 1-1. I mean, if at this point you don't think he's Johnny Bench, then he's no longer a 1-1. Right. I mean, Matt Wieters was Johnny Bench right up to the point where he wasn't Johnny Bench, or Joe Mauer or any of that stuff, right? So the only one I don't ever judge. I mean, you just take these goofy baseball jumps that like.
No.
He's a AA guy, so he's going to project. I don't ever project anybody.
Didn't I say?
So I say for me, I don't project them to be a contender next year. So if they're not a contender next year, then you'd say, all right, for all of these pieces, and look, there's a history for this, right? Go look at the Houston history. Some of those guys, and I would tell you that Keuchel would be one of them. Keuchel got good, but only the Astros felt like he was good. Everybody else felt like, let's go hit off of him. We'll be the ones that figure him out. Soft throwing lefty, whatever. at some point, he became the Cy Young guy on a contending team because no one ever bought the horse at the sale.
But who was the
because
veteran?
the price on the horse didn't sort of look like the bloodline, right? And I would say that will be the case on Mullins. And I mean, Luke and I had the longest conversation about Kevin Gausman because Kevin Gausman looks like Sandy Koufax right now, right?
Miguel Castro.
Kevin Gausman was a number 4 overall draft pick. He was a prodigy kind of guy. You never know when that guy's going to be Steven Strasburg or whether that guy's going to be Ben McDonald or whether that guy's going to be Andy Bennis, right? I mean, so all of these guys.
Miguel Castro is unhittable, and he couldn't throw strikes with us. He couldn't put back. So I understand it's a crapshoot, but go back. You referenced Astro Ball. At some point, they said, okay, we're close enough.
They dealt some of the guys, though. I'm telling you,
but
part,
they also
part of that was
to...
some of the Trey Mancinis, they felt like at that moment they were going to get that value for. Don, they can do that anytime with these guys because none of them have any value beyond what they're hitting today.
See, that's not my point. My point is exactly the opposite. Have they moved beyond the point where it's necessary to deal a Trey or a Mullins? I don't think you deal Mullins now at all, given what he's doing. To the point where they're now
looking.
That's
just a ludicrous concept that Mike Elias would laugh at you for saying that.
What? That you wouldn't deal Mullins?
You wouldn't deal Mullins. Mike Elias would laugh.
Well, it would have to be.
Maybe he would. If you brought him on the radio, he'd have to say whatever the hell that he'd have to say. But to think that they wouldn't deal Cedric Mullins right now, of course they would.
First of
all, they're loving the fact that he's producing like this so that they can entice somebody to give him something. For
only,
him.
Nestor, here's the thing. Only if they still believe. This is the point, and I'm obviously not making it very well.
You're in fantasy land if I'm not. They're a contender next year.
Okay. Suppose I said you got to give me a couple ifs. Suppose DL Hall and Grayson Rodriguez are ready to pitch at this level next year, and all of a sudden you've got Means, Rodriguez, Hall. Somehow it looks as if they may have unlocked Lopez, and I'm hoping Lopez is our Gausman story in reverse, right? Because every time I've seen Lopez pitch, his stuff is electric. And I would say to our gang,
look, this is going on with Arrieta. This is going on forever, right? I mean, it happens.
But at some point, there's a point in Astro Ball and in Money Ball and all of them where you start buying rather than selling. And my point to you is we may be closer to the buying.
Elias hasn't even sold anything yet. What's the deal he's tell me deals Elias has made that if none. He hasn't sold it. He hadn't anything to sell.
Well, he hasn't.
Team was stunk for 3 years.
They've been upfront about that.
And we had a plague.
They haven't, but they've been upfront about that. Well, that's first of all, they've been upfront about that they weren't in the buy mode yet. That's exactly out of Astro Ball what they're doing. That's what I'm saying. At some point, they flip the switch, and my observation is they may be close. I thought it was 2023. I'm saying I'm not so sure. For example, you could win. You could be a playoff team with Freddie Galvis at shortstop. Much better than I thought he would be. Much better. I didn't think he would be this good. He fields better than I thought, and he hits better than I thought. You could make the playoffs with Freddie Galvis as your. I don't care which team you were, the Yankees, Red Sox, whoever. Dodgers, you could win. You could go to the playoffs with Freddie Galvis as your shortstop and not be embarrassed.
It's a good thing we don't talk more baseball. I mean,
I'd rather
talk about it. It's not that I disagree. I just fundamentally think you are entrapped in whatever Stockholm syndrome they have over there that has whatever day having you feeling the best you can feel. They're the worst team in the American League. No one's going to the games. They're only not the worst team in Major League Baseball because another team stinks more. And I think their whole philosophy right now.
I didn't say they weren't the worst.
Go ahead.
I haven't said they weren't terrible. I said they're probably not going to win 70 or 71 games.
But this notion that they're going to be competitive next year is not the way these guys are wired. These guys are wired
I
to drive Cedric Mullins' value to a point where somebody has to give them a Grayson Rodriguez for him. That's what they're trying to do. And if they can do that, then that's how they feel like they're going to win the poker game. They're not going to win the poker game with the guys they have in the lineup right now. Any of these guys. I think they
unless
are all hanging, dangling meat to be dealt for something we can use in 23 or 24.
unless they conclude that we are indeed closer than even they thought. And in other
Or
words,
unless they conclude that Cedric Mullins can't bring them
well, first of all,
anything that feels like Grayson Rodriguez.
first of all, could if you were a really good team, could you be a playoff team with Cedric Mullins? Of course you could. Right now, I told you,
I'm not down on Cedric Mullins at all. I just think if they're you'll get your question answered, right? Like it feels like a sports radio
that's
guy.
exactly
You'll get
right.
your question answered whether they either deal him or don't deal him based on where his value is. But the trading deadline's coming. Teams will have a need for a player like him. And then you'll say, well, what is his real value? It's like my condo. You thought it was worth $1 million. I promised you it was half price, and we haven't figured that out yet. So
give Jeff Moeller a call. Moeller and Gary Realtors. Come on, he's got this. Look at behind Nestor.
But he can't make it worth more than what somebody's eventually going to pay for it.
I couldn't agree more.
The market is the market.
And my point is, I think you're absolutely right. We are going to find out. I think the next couple of months will be interesting because I think, some things will settle out in the minor leagues. I totally agree with what you said in that don't put too much stock in what guys do in the minor leagues. Although I do think I think there are some standards. For example, Mountcastle hit at every level. So far, Rushman is killing the ball at AA. Next stop, AAA. So some guys, Gunnar Henderson appears that he's about ready to be promoted. Jordan Westerberg. So it appears that we have some pieces, and you want to become the Astros. You want to become Oakland. More importantly, I want to become Tampa Bay, where I turn out the pitchers like Purdue turns out chickens. Every year they just have more pitches, but more to come on the Recon in future weeks.
Well, I would just say this on the baseball side. I for the season and for how the other teams in the American League East are playing right now, it's a good baseball season. It's an interesting baseball season when San Diego and LA think they're going to be something, and here come the Giants. The Cubs are interesting this year. The National League East is a show, but who knows how that works out.
Nestor,
big
Tampa
cities
story,
are involved. The Mets are decent. They're in town this week, so yes.
The Tampa Bay story is just a head scratcher for me. Year after year with no money and no fans. They're there. I guess it's what every organization, everybody wants to be Tampa, right? Because it's truly remarkable.
Well, they sell you on that. And here's the problem. And in this phone call, you've illustrated what the issue is. If you're Mr. Big Shot and you're Peter Angelos, you're in there telling Mike Elias, we can win next year. And he's thinking, oh my God, this
Mr. Angelos,
crazy old man has no idea.
Angelos,
like what we're trying to do here, because that's how it gets screwed up.
But
how it gets screwed up is when you go too deep in on whatever your assets are that aren't valued by other people.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, we'll win with Cedric Mullins in 2023. And you should have dealt him in 2021.
That's the biggest difference.
They'd be a better team right now had they hired these guys and bit the bullet on Buck in that last year and brought these guys in and had them deal Manny Machado when they were supposed to be dealt. This team would be competitive right now.
No doubt about it. But the big difference and the thing that gives me hope is the difference between now and 5, 6, 7 years ago is there's no doubt there's one guy in charge. It's Mike Elias, and he's not getting interference from anybody, certainly not getting interference from Peter, and we don't wish any ill of anyone.
Well, then I'm saying
Peter
I hope he doesn't concur with you in this. When he listens to this, he understands that the Aparicio guy made some sense, because I don't think there's no deal Mike Elias isn't listening to right now. And I don't even mean that with disrespect to DL Hall.
Nestor, I would listen to deals if somebody wanted to come in and throw the world at me for Lamar Jackson on the red.
You can't have Brian Ebel, though. You can't have him.
I'm for listening for any deals. Anyway, Another lively edition of the Recon.
I love putting plugs in for the baseball guys that I still like, that still work for the team, that I see show up on TV for all the wrong reasons. He's out there with John Means running around.
Yeah.
The Means injury sucks, though. I mean, that kid was – I mean, this team has players you can cheer for. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The fact that your Jake loves Cedric Mullins.
Oh, he loves him. Loves him.
Yeah, I mean, look –
And we
I
haven't
get
seen
all of that.
anybody.
Don't tell Jake not to fall in love with him or to listen to you in regard to Cedric Mullins being undealable. Because later in the summer, where he's wearing like a White Sox hat or whatever, you'll understand. He'll understand.
Well, it certainly has been. And again, for the oldies but goodies out there, we haven't seen anybody play center field like this since Paul Blair. As Palmer reminds us.
Every time I see him.
Oh,
I just
Bunbury or Blair, probably more Blair to me. I mean, this guy, the territory that he travels out there to the gaps is remarkable. So anyway, lots of fun. We'll do more Recon next week.
All right. Don Mahler is my Recon buddy, even when we disagree, which is part of the shtick, I think, at this point. I think he just comes and pokes the bear here while the team's in last place to feel better. We're going to resurrect the Rex Barney show hosted by Don Mahler. We're going to take phone calls.
There you go.
Okay. Can we make a deal to get Kevin Gosman back now?
God, Gosman. Who's the other? I'm drawing a blank. The Cy Young winner.
Arrieta?
Oh my God, Jake! How would we look with Arrieta and Gosman and Castro? It's a crapshoot. But we used to trust in Ozzie. We trust in DaCosta. I trust in Mike Elias.
If we just wouldn't have dealt that Eduardo Rodriguez guy, right? Back in the day.
Another one we rented a guy for a couple
Don,
months.
I'm telling you, we're still eating off the fact that we stole McGregor and those guys in the deal with the Yankees. So, we'll live off the 1970. Rick Dempsey's still with the organization, for Christ's sake.
There you go.
All right, Don Mohler, he is the Recon. Well, we're going to do it together. We got great guests coming up here. We are with the mayor of Baltimore, Brandon Scott at Coco's this week. That's going to go great for us as well. Josh Kurtz coming by. We're going to be talking to Larry Gibson as well. And if you missed our chat with our Senator, Chris Van Hollen, you can find that in an unbelievable chat with Ron Cassie about what makes Maryland awesome. You can find all that and more. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and BaltimorePositive.com. And Recon.